بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. نويت تعلم وتعليم وتذكر والتذكير ونفع دفاع إفادة الاستفادة، وحتى تمس بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم، والدعاء إلى هدى ودلالة على الخير، ابتغاء وسلام وطاعة وقرب ثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. اللهم علمنا مما ينفعنا وينفعنا بما تعلمنا، وانزلنا من فضلك وإما وتعليما، إنك على كل شيء قدير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So welcome all those who may be with us for our monthly Living Islam program, and inshallah ta'ala, we welcome you all, and inshallah ta'ala, we want to just start off by just going over the basic aspect of the Living Islam. So the Living Islam, it was initially started as a space for people to be able to ask and engage in different things that they may not necessarily be able to when they're in a halaqah type of setting, or at the masjid, or these type of things. So we try to create, I guess, using popular terms nowadays, a kind of third space, um, where people can come and not have any type of formal lecture or anything like that happen, but can just talk about things that might be on their minds, in general. And so we developed the Living Islam. And so, just as I kind of normally will do, is that I'll mention that I have nothing prepared. And so this is purely a participation aspect. And so if no one says anything, then we can sit in each other's comfortable or uncomfortable silence, however you kind of look at it. And also, I always like to say, like, I don't ever like to have it assumed that this is like a Q&A or anything like that. And so everyone is free to, unmute themselves, post in the chat. If you are using Facebook, you can put in your comments and possible questions there. But again, I don't like for it to be kind of thought as if this is, a Q&A, because that's not what it's meant to be, even though it can be a situation that if questions are answered, if I happen to know an answer for it, then inshallah I try to give a response. And so that is my little spiel in terms of uh, the Living Islam. And so now I will turn it over to everyone else. And like I said, we can also sit in each other's um, silence for the next 2 hours or so.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa barakatuh.
Well, since I'm the only participant here and I soon have to leave to go pray, I just want to give my salam and I'll inshallah back because I have to go pray. But
Okay, no
uh
problem.
I just want to I just want to give a reading. But so what's your feeling uh about how you feel, and then in generally how you think Muslims should feel about the our election that just took place almost 2 weeks ago.
I'm sorry, I kind of feel like that's a loaded question. Most people know I don't do politics. But so I'll put it like this. The second part of your question, I'm not going to answer. And the reason why I say that is because I'm not going to try to say that Muslims in general should feel one particular way about any given situation. And that's actually one of the beautiful things about the Deen of Islam is that there is leeway for there to be different feelings and viewpoints and opinions. And so I wouldn't uh, even think to, place my position or opinion on the ummah, so to speak. One of the things I can say in regards to it is that I read something interesting. There was an article that I just happened to come across online, and it was saying that there were a group of Muslims who had did a campaign for trying to elect Donald Trump in particular, and that they are now upset because Donald Trump is putting in his cabinet um, officials who have taken a very anti-Palestinian, anti-Philistine position, and so on and so forth. And so it kind of just struck me, and I had said to my wife, and just kind of said to myself when I was reading, it's kind of like, well, what did you expect? Type of thing. Uh, because I mean, just even from if you want to take politics as if they're actually truthful, um, just if you wanted to take it just from like the two parties, the Republican and Democratic Party, like the Republicans have already had the platform that they wanted to be staunch against the Palestinian movement. I mean, and then also if you want to look at Donald Trump's previous term, he's the one who moved the embassy from wherever it was in Israel to Jerusalem intentionally, and so on and so forth. So it's just kind of like, I don't know what the expectation was in terms of trying to motivate people to vote for Donald Trump as if that was going to be kind of like the Muslim saving grace. Is I'm not saying that Kamala Harris is any better. I'm just saying it's just interesting to me that that there's like kind of this disappointment that Donald Trump isn't, I guess, going in guns a blazing and saying, Israel, you better stop this. Like, I don't know what was expected uh, uh, with him being elected. That's one thing I can say.
Okay, and I'll follow that quickly. But the other question is that before the election, there was a lot of groups of Muslims who were saying that even voting was like haram. Like I guess there's like, for lack of a better characterization, Salafi brothers who were staunch about that, and I found that to be kind of odd. But what's your opinion on that?
So again, and that that's a fifth issue, So I don't have a opinion personally, but the thing is that from the standpoint of the ulama, many ulama have said that it would be permissible to participate in governmental elections and things like that, even in non-Muslim governments, in particular because those will have effects upon you in terms of your ability to practice your deen. And so, I'm not going to be the one that goes around telling people that, voting is haram or that, and also I'm not going to be on the opposite end telling Muslims that, oh, you need to go out and vote. Again, I will leave that in the individual person's perspective in terms of what they feel is the most beneficial thing. And so, you can't, you know, to my limited knowledge, is that there is no ijma, there is no consensus in regards to the aspect of voting, of whether or not we're going to consider that is absolutely haram, or whether it would be something that would be permissible or even possibly recommended based upon the aspect of the different laws and things like that that government officials can enact that can have a harmful effect for the Muslim community in general. And so, it's I know that there are, individuals who will say, oh, well, this is a kufr or a kafir country. They're running it based upon kufr, and so you shouldn't vote, and so because you'd be voting for kufr and so on and so forth. But at the same time, you have to again look at it from the standpoint of all the different laws and things like that that they're going to be implementing that will have effects upon the Muslims and their ability to practice their Islam, or their ability to not participate in things that we would deem to be antithetical to Islam. And so, again, it's not going to be something where I'm going to necessarily say to someone, oh, it's haram for you to vote, nor am I going to say to someone, oh, you necessarily need to go and vote. Politics, I generally leave that to individuals. It's one of the conversations that I try to avoid as much as possible. Uh, but yeah, the aspect of, if a person has the position that voting is haram, okay, alhamdulillah. That is their personal position that they feel comfortable with. And so it's a matter, like I said, there's no ijma upon it, there's no consensus upon it. And so if a person chooses to take another opinion, then there shouldn't be an aspect of consider that other person to be sinful or anything of that. It's a matter of ikhtilaf. It's a matter of a difference of opinion. And so we can leave it at that. And we each go about our own separate ways.
Just okay. I'll rejoin you guys shortly. Inshallah.
Inshallah. Great questions. I think people like I said, I think those are loaded for me because in general I think people know my position on politics, and we'll just say they're not the most positive. Alhamdulillah. Guess we have to wait to get some more people.
Assalamu alaikum, Ustadh. I'll ask a question to get the ball going, I guess. I came across a question in one of my chat groups, and it was from a recent convert, and she was just asking all the sisters this question. And I just wanted to see what your guidance would be on it and what maybe perhaps the Sira has to say about this situation. So she's a recent convert with a single mom with many children living in the West in a very, very small town. So in a way, she's kind of isolated. And she said that, given these circumstances and being a very new convert, she's been struggling, and I guess she was reaching out to other sisters, just to get, I don't know, empathy or support and whatnot. And as a Muslim sister, like, what's the guidance on that? How should you approach a new convert? And what advice to give them, making sure that it's sincere. I mean, I know you mentioned, turn to the books. But I feel like sometimes, these sisters or, commerce in general are looking for something more than a book. So I'm wondering what your guidance is and what does the Sira say as well, when there were new converts in society, how did they become part of the community and whatnot?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily a easy question, and particularly because we deal with things on different levels of sociability. So, for example, you have people who are like the fakir here, who's an introvert. So, like, I can live isolated from people and be in the like, I'm really liking this Pennsylvania area. It's nice and like in the middle of nowhere. But alhamdulillah, you have the Closet community right there. Um, so you have people who are like that. And but you also have people um who are more extroverted, and they really truly feed off of being able to interact with other people in person. So it's not an easy situation. Usually for sisters, what I would say is in particular because um, Rawata has many interactive things that they do, is that usually I will recommend for sisters who are like in isolated areas to do their best to become part of the Rawata community. And particularly because they have online programs that they do that encourage adherence to the deen. But at the same time, they also have like individual things where like sometimes you might get partnered up with another sister specifically, and you two act as encouraging figures for one another and so on and so forth. The other thing is that sisters can just take that type of concept and idea for themselves and be willing to, help and assist convert sisters, even if it's just, hey, we can meet up for a Zoom call, or, you can join me for this online class that I'm doing, or something of that nature, or maybe we'll do a book club, we'll read XYZ book, and then we'll discuss what we benefited from it and so on and so forth. So having individual sisters being willing to take on that initiative and use that as being a sadaqah jariyah, I mean an aspect of sadaqah, an aspect of gaining hasanats with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by bringing happiness and joy to the hearts of another Muslim. In terms of the seerah, not it's not necessarily as easy from the standpoint of the seerah, because the Prophet ﷺ, for example, who used to often do one of two things, is that he would have people make hijrah. He would have people actually move from wherever they were and go to where the Muslims were. I mean, like if you want to go into like old fiqh books, like for example, Imam Ghazali, for example, in some of his works, he would mention that it would not be considered to be permissible for a Muslim to stay in an area. And one opinion of Imam Ghazali was that he said that it was not permissible for a Muslim to live in a non-Muslim country unless their intention was for da'wah. Uh, that, so unless your intention was for dawah, Imam Ghazali considers being permissible for a Muslim to live in a non-Muslim country. And then other fuqaha, they would say that it's not permissible for a Muslim to live in an area where there is not a mufti or a sheikh that can teach them the basics of their deen. So I say that to say is that some of the prophetic remedies was that it was encouraged to try your best to move to areas where the Muslims were. The other aspect was that the Prophet ﷺ would sometimes send some of his highly trained companions to areas. So, for example, he sent the likes of Ma'ab bin Jabal to Yemen, for example, where Mu'ad would be able to teach the people about Islam, and then mix with them as well and establish things for them there as well. So essentially, the aspect of either going to where the people are, or on the flip side, the possibility of having someone being sent to where you were. Now the thing is that the Prophet ﷺ can do that, and it was somewhat a little bit not necessarily somewhat, but it was easier to do that in some aspects in the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ than it is today. So I mean, I would still kind of lean to like the first suggestions that I made in the aspect of um, utilizing the online communities. Yes, it's not the same as being in person, but as they say, like, if you don't have fresh, can will work. Yes, it's better to eat fresh food, but if you don't have fresh food, then you won't be hungry by eating canned food. So, but again, I recommend the Rawata community for sisters in particular because again, they have that aspect of a group community, but then they also do things where they have like more individual communities where they have sisters working with each other specifically, and they do have a focus on convert sisters in particular. Auntie Tamara is herself a convert, so she has a very um, a very big soft spot for those who convert to Islam.
Jazakallah khair. That's helpful. I forgot that they do their weekly qiyams and they have the halakas as well. Um, the other thing you mentioned, being support to the sister, I think for myself, I don't have, formal education, so part of me is hesitant to give that support in case I give the wrong knowledge. So all that doubt creeps in, because I'm worried, what if I give her the wrong information, lead her wrong, and I don't want to do that. Obviously you can lead with good intentions, and whatnot. But that worry is just like in the back of my mind. What if I say the wrong thing? Yeah.
I would say don't worry too much about that. I mean, generally speaking, people are not going to ask like, like ridiculous philosophical questions, especially a person that's new to Islam. I mean, a person that's new to Islam, their biggest fear is probably learning the Fatiha, and all the things associated with the Salat. And so the thing is that oftentimes the shaitan, he will always try to put doubts in our heads such that we don't fully benefit from or allow others to benefit from us in those type of circumstances. Even for people who I know who go formally study, like, this is something that was mentioned, I think. I'm not going to name names because I don't remember exactly what the situation is, but this was a situation that happened where one of the brothers had gone overseas to study, and it was said to him, "Is like, alhamdulillah, you're going to go overseas and you're going to study for a number of years, and then by the time that you come back, you're only going to be teaching what you learned in those first 2 years, maybe." Meaning that, for the majority of people, most people, their questions don't get beyond ibadat, for example. So like, again, so the questions don't get much further than, you know, how do I make wudu, or how do I say the Fatiha, or how do I do the tashahhud, and so on and so forth. And even in those questions, that's only going to be sometimes. For many people, they just want company. I mean, they want, because the thing is that, especially if we're someone who may have been born into Islam or who have been Muslim for a significant amount of time, so we have Muslim friends and community and so on and so forth, is that sometimes we don't really give credence to the difficulties that happen to a new convert, because for some people, them converting to Islam, they did have like a good social network of friends, but now, they're trying to live out Islam. So like, they're trying not to go to the bar, they're trying not to go to the club and so on and so forth. And that's just taking a, hit on the social aspect of their lives. And so sometimes it's just being present with them. Like, it doesn't have to necessarily be about talking about religion. I mean, in general, if I'm around people, and I've gotten this advice somewhat from Sheikh Faraz Rabbani, is that I don't necessarily even try to necessarily talk religiously, for example. Like, for example, when I'm at the college at Lehigh, doing my job there. But I'm around the Muslim students, I don't necessarily try to talk about religion per se. I'll talk about whatever it is that they're into. Like I'll talk about, I'll ask them like, what is this like? There was one student that was at the dialogue center where my office is, and he had his computer open and I saw it and I was like, he was doing some coding thing. So I asked him, about coding, or like I'll ask the students about how classes are going, or how uh how the game was that they the soccer game that they played or something like that. Like I'll talk to them just about anything but religion, and just from the aspect of just even having that basic social aspect, because for many people, even if they're uh even if they are trying to be religious, like basically when I'm around people, I let them dictate how religious we're going to get. Like, if you don't necessarily bring up religion, I'm not necessarily going to bring up religion. If you want to talk about religion, then I will go full in with you, so to speak. So I just let them, them dictate. And actually, if you want to get technical, that is an aspect of chaplaincy where you allow for people to guide you as to where they want to go, meaning that you don't try to force any type of topic or conversation with them, but rather you allow them to guide the conversation in whatever direction that they want it to be in. And so, yeah, I wouldn't really worry about like, if they're going to ask some type of religious question that you may not know, or that you might answer possibly wrong or anything like that. I mean, at the end of the day, and this is, this could be a training from the nafs as well, is that don't be afraid to say la adri, I don't know. That's probably the safest answer that most of us could give anyway. Well, yeah. Anyone else want to keep the ball rolling? لا بس like I said, I will. One of the other things that you are taught in chaplaincy is to be comfortable in silence. The aspect that many of us were not comfortable with silence. And so when we speak with others, if there is a silent moment, we always try to find something to fill it with. And that's not always the most beneficial. Sometimes it's nice just to be silent, allow for people to think. And
You already done?
mm-mm.
It's break?
Nope,
You're done?
nope. Comment via email from. I haven't attended a mosque in person yet, so I don't feel fully ready. Um, yeah, I mean, any new thing in life uh can definitely be a challenge in terms of um being willing and able to engage it. One second. Muhammad. Okay, sorry about that. And so one of the ways to try to make it easier in terms of going to a masjid, is that if you're able to have someone that you are comfortable with that is a Muslim, go with you and have a masjid that they suggest. Because if I were to be perfectly honest, not every masjid is all that welcoming, and it can make the situation even worse. So I can give an example. My brother, and some of you may have heard me mention the story again previously, but my brother had told me of a situation of a young woman who had entered into Islam and decided that she wanted to go to the masjid. And when she went, I don't know exactly what she was wearing, but according to some of the sisters at the masjid, it wasn't appropriate dress for the masjid. So, again, I don't know to what extent it was, but in whatever case, the sisters who were there decided that they were going to command the good and forbid the evil by getting on the sister and basically saying, like, how could you come to the masjid dressed like that? What are you doing? And so on and so forth, to the point that, it just they completely bombarded the sister. And so she left the masjid. However, once she left the masjid, she also left Islam. And so, and then I was recently, not too long ago, I heard a recording of Ustadh Yusuf Welch, Shukran. Ustadh Yusuf Welch mentioning about a situation with like one of his friends, and he actually was able to go to the masjid with him. And he had a similar experience where the friend, he wasn't even Muslim, but Ustad Yusuf had invited him to the masjid to, introduce him more to Islam and so on and so forth. And as soon as the brother walks in, one of the uncles, starts to come up to him and starts to browbeat him about how he came to the masjid. And, Ustad Yusuf, in the recording, he was saying like how he had said to the Muslim who was, trying to get on his friend, it's like, هل تتكلم لغة عربي? Do you speak Arabic? And then Ustad Yusuf was, had to tell him in Arabic, like, he's not even Muslim. I was inviting him here to, to see the masjid and to hopefully open his heart up to Islam. So it's like, the first thing that he encounters is, you coming in here and telling him how basically he's not welcome. So I say that to say it's like I'm not trying to turn people away from the masjid, but I'm just saying is that you have situations in where unfortunately the masajid is not necessarily always that welcoming. And so, you don't, especially someone who is new to Islam, you don't want that to be their experience. And so it is a situation where you do, more or less want to be particular about where you go. But I suggest if a person can have someone that they trust and that they have a good relationship with, accompany them and suggest a masjid to go to, that could be much easier than just trying to go on one's own. And Allah knows best.
I actually have a thick question that just popped up in my head. Given that it's cold and flu season, everybody's getting sick and I have a bit of a sore throat too. And I was wondering, I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, in Hanafi fiqh, when you do the prayer, you should be able to hear yourself recite. So what would happen if you lose your voice? Would your prayer, like, could you just, use your lips just to recite, I guess, without any sound coming out? Would that still be valid, or maybe I have the incorrect information about that?
Um, so you're asking me in terms of Hanafi fiqh. Yes. I've recently started studying the Hanafi madhab, but uh, I would definitely not consider myself to be one to try to answer Hanafi fiqh questions. However, um, what the ulama generally speaking mean when they say that you should be able to hear yourself is that what they call a voiceless whisper. So essentially, and so even often, I mean, I can only speak for myself. I've never had a sore throat to the point that I couldn't even do a voiceless whisper. So as long as a person is able to do that, then inshallah their prayer would be valid. Um, and so it would, however, for example, if a person is a mute, um, like for example, a person is not capable. I just want to double check something. Yeah, and so there's another fatwa position that it seems to be that even if one's lips move, even without sound, then that can also count towards it. So like if it came to a situation where a person just was absolutely not able to recite, like there's nothing that's coming out from their voice, then at least just moving their lips, even without sound, and Allah knows best.
Jazakallah khair. That's helpful. I was just curious. I was like, I'm starting to lose my voice, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what would happen if it's completely gone. So that was beneficial. Thank you.
Yeah, so if it's completely gone, inshallah ta'ala, I'll give you shifa, and so that it doesn't get to that point. But if you're completely gone, then at least moving the lips during the salat, inshallah ta'ala. Yeah, I actually heard that the flu is on the rise. Particularly, and they mentioned that it's getting to the point where we're getting back to the flu being like it was pre-COVID, and particularly because people are more out and about again, as opposed to when we were in COVID. And I was actually just talking to a coworker of mine and saying how, yes, there were definitely some adverse aspects of COVID, but I actually had some quite beneficial times in COVID, being able to, like I said, I'm an introvert and I don't mind being home. So COVID was actually pretty cool. Didn't have to worry about driving to work. Was able to do some stuff in the meantime. I actually bought my first house during COVID. The prices was great. So only thing I hated about COVID was when I had to go to the store, especially in the beginning when the lines were like 2 hours long or whatever. That was about the only thing. But, you know, I did not mind having to stay home. So, yeah. Well, the whole toilet issue aspect, alhamdulillah, about being Muslim, we know about istinja, so even if they didn't have toilet paper, we can still stay clean. I remember me and my family, we had some piping issue in our old house. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm going to be taking it back to Yemen. Because in Yemen, we did not have toilet paper. At least not Dar Mustafa or Badr. My wife likes to say at Dar Zahra, they just made sure that they kept their own personal toilet paper, but all we had was water. Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. We know everything happens as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it, but how or what can we do to accept it and be at peace with the situation? So there are many different aspects of that. Um, One is that there's nothing that actually says that we have to be at peace with a situation, because in some situation it is a situation where we are supposed to have particular emotions. So for example, if we see atrocities happening in the world, then it is supposed to garner a particular emotion. If we see a person being harmed or oppressed, it should inculcate a sense of anger in us. If we see a person going through a great difficulty, then it should inculcate an aspect of empathy, or possibly sadness, or the like. So the aspect of having different emotions in regards to things that we go through in life, that is actually supposed to be there. Now, the aspect of acceptance of it is the aspect of understanding that everything that we see in this life, there are two things that we can always fall back on and remember. One is that we are very limited in terms of the knowledge that we have about anything. And I say that to say is that, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, is that it may be that we love a thing and it's actually evil for us. And it may be that we hate a thing and it's actually good for us, meaning that we are not always aware of what the true reality of any situation is. So, from an outward perspective, we may be seeing something as being bad, but the reality of it is that there could be some type of immense good in that situation, and we just don't know it. And so, the aspect of this world is that everything in this world is temporary. And so, you will have different situations that occur, but they're all going to be on a temporary nature, and it's all going to be things that ultimately, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if it is a wrong, ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will rectify it by the time that we get to the akhirah. And then if it's a situation where we are able to do something about it, then we take the means that we can, trying to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala therein, and knowing that inshallah our reward will be with Allah. And so again, this aspect of knowing or trying to come to understanding that, for one, we don't know the wisdom in terms of all the different things that may happen in the world. And also, it's just like with the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, that when they were at the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, where the Prophet Muhammad SAW was prevented from making Umrah for that year, and the Sahaba were looking at the terms of the treaty that the Prophet had made. From a short-sighted perspective, it looked like the Muslims were basically entering into a agreement that was just completely against them. However, the Prophet Muhammad SAW, he understood, and also the likes of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, radiallahu anhu, that they could see that this is something that's right now we may not be able to see the benefit of this, but in the long run, there is going to be a benefit that's going to come from it. And so the thing is that in certain situations, we can see something, not knowing that this is actually going to have some type of benefit from some years to come. And the thing is, it could be some situation where the benefit doesn't come until we're long and gone, but that benefit may come. And so, but the thing is that it's not to say that every situation is going to be like that. However, it is to say is that, again, for one, our knowledge is limited. We don't know what the ultimate reality of any situation is. And then for two, again, this understanding that this life is temporary and that ultimately our ultimate return is going to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's just like, I was just recently was hearing the verses of Surah Yasin, and in Surah Yasin, in the beginning of Surah Yasin, it mentions about the case of the man who had come from the outskirts of the city. And then he was trying to tell his people, he's trying to call his people to follow the messengers that they had been sent. And eventually what happened is that the people had killed him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does he say? He says, قِيلَ ادْخُلُوا الْجَنَّةَ قَالَ يَا لَيْتَ قَوْمِي يَعْلَمُونَ بِمَا غَفَرَ لِي رَبِّي وَجَعَلَنِي مِنَ الْمُكْرِمِينَ. That he says, it's going to be said to him, قِيلَ يَدْخُلُوا الْجَنَّةَ. It's going to be said to him, enter into paradise. And then he says what? And then the man who was killed unjustly by his people, he's going to say what? يا ليت قومي خلتك جنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون. Oh, woe to my people if only they knew بما غفر لي ربي, that how my Lord has forgiven me, وجعلني من المكرمين, and that he's made me. And I just want to make sure that I'm translating it correctly and reciting the verse correctly. Min al-mukramin, one of those who are honored. Basically how well my Lord has honored me. And so he's mentioning that, Ya layta qawmi ya'lamun, if only, woe to my people, if only they would know, bima ghafara li rabbi, with what my Lord have forgiven me, bima ghafara li rabbi wa ja'alani min al-mukramin, and that he's made me of those who are truly honored. And so even though in this life it may seem as if he, for lack of a better way of putting it, had gotten the short end of the stick, his people killed him. But he's saying that if only his people will be able to see what he is witnessing now. It's just like, some of the teachers and the dais have mentioned even about some of the things that are happening in Philistine right now. And so we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them a release from the injustices that they are going through, and the difficulties and the hardships that they're going through. But as some have mentioned, is that if we were to only know the station and the situation that those who have been martyred are going through right now, we would be envious of them. And for example, I think one of them have mentioned is that, if you were to be able to ask them, would they want to come back, to this world, they would, tell they would tell us no, because of what they are, being provided through from their Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so again, it's a situation where in our own capacity, if we do see injustices or these type of things, yes, they are and they should um bring out of us particular emotions, but all of those things have to be kept in balance, meaning that we should always ask ourselves the question, what does Allah want from me in this situation? But then secondly, remembering that we have very limited knowledge of anything in this world. And then thirdly is that ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one where all justice and all rewards and all good and and others and other and everything else is going to return to. And so inshallah that's how we try to look at the life of this world, is that everything is ultimately through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He is the one that is best aware of His creation. And the only thing He's asked for us is that from whatever means that He's given us, how are we going to respond to it? Are we going to respond to it in a way that is pleasing to Him, or are we going to respond in a way that is displeasing to Him? And essentially, that's the only thing that we will be able to be responsible for, bi'ithnillah. Um, I don't know if that helps, but inshallah ta'ala, it can be a means of benefit. Um, Sister Valerie, assalamu alaikum. I have a question regarding when someone is speaking to you about religion and they are able to quote a scripture from the Bible with it being in chronological order, but I find it difficult for myself to remember any particular surah and have an intelligent response. Um, if I if I um Oftentimes I don't necessarily recommend having religious conversations, particularly with people of other faith traditions, um, just because it oftentimes is not necessarily going to lead to any type of benefit often. And the reason why I say that is because you have very few people who are like Imam Shafi'i, for example. Imam Shafi'i, he used to say before going into a debate, may Allah manifest the truth on the tongue of my opponent so so that I may follow it. And most people are not making that type of dua before they, start talking to someone in particular in a situation where there will be disagreements. And so the thing is that oftentimes if I'm talking to someone, even if it's not necessarily a debate, but it's just like, we're having a discussion about religion, is that oftentimes people are not in a position where they're going to be willing to truly accept what it is that you say. They're just really looking for the next time that they can say something in response to whatever it is that you said. And so it's just like, all of this is like, it's kind of like a batter up type of thing. Like, they're just waiting for the time that they can take a take a swing at wherever it is that you're pitching at them. However, if you are going to engage with someone in religious talk, then I would say, you don't necessarily always have to look to quote the Quran or necessarily to quote the Quran verbatim. Sometimes you might just give general concepts of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran. But it's also going to just be dependent upon, what the conversation is about and so on and so forth and who it's with um and so on and so forth. And so, but again, in general, I don't necessarily recommend getting into religious conversations with people in other religious traditions. But again, if you have difficulty recollecting particular surahs and the like, then you can speak of the Quran in more general terms that, Allah mentions this concept in the Quran or Allah mentions that concept in the Quran. And then if people want, specifics, you can direct them to Sheikh Google. You know, uh, I don't necessarily recommend usually using Sheikh Google, but just to find a particular verse where something is mentioned or something like that, Google can be utilized for something like that. Just don't look at anyone's tafsir or their own personal explanations of it, because God knows there's all types of stuff out there. Yeah, so If it's with family, as one of my teachers say, everything is relative except for the relatives. They're absolute. So, with family, you try to tread lightly. If you can avoid the religious conversations, I would suggest that. But again, if it's with family and like, they're going to be asking religious questions, then I would just make it more general. You don't necessarily have to specifically quote a verse of the Quran or anything like that. Or you can just say like, I don't know that, but I can get back to you on that. Um, and then at the same time, just try to treat them with the best of character. Because oftentimes when people see how nice and how good you are, they'll forget, you know, many of the differences that they have with you. So as the saying goes, people don't always remember what you say, but they remember how you make them feel. And so if you can, have a good relationship with your family outside of religion, then that can also help the situation. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, Dr. Ali Attai. Yeah, mashallah, I had the pleasure of briefly being around him when I was in Tarim for a little bit. But yeah, he does work at Zaytuna. Yeah, he's basically a biblical scholar. Like he knows more about the Bible than I would easily probably estimate 90% of Christians. So he's like he would be like a reference point of those of us who are kind of inclined towards kalam and these type of things of in different aspects of the Bible. But yeah, I mean, it really just depends. I haven't listened to a lecture of his. I don't think I've ever listened to a full lecture of his. Like I've caught bits and pieces here and there. So I don't know how technical he gets. But even like something like Dr. Ali, it may not necessarily be beneficial with family members because if people feel attacked, again, oftentimes it's not about it's not about what you say, but it's how you make people feel. So if people like if you recommend Dr. Ali's, a video from him and like, people feel like he's just attacking Christianity, like whether or not they would actually be willing to agree with it or whether the case may be, is oftentimes it might just turn them off just from the mere fact that you're trying to basically say that what they've believed in for the last 20, 30, or all their lives is wrong, and so that's very, very hard for people. um and this is one of the things I actually tell people in regards to doing dawah work is that because some people it's like if they can't get someone to convert in 10 minutes, like, they're trying to figure out, like, what's wrong with you? Like, it's clear. So it's like, now if we switch the situation, if someone tried to get you to convert to Buddhism or Christianity or any other religion from Islam, how would you feel? You know, more likely you wouldn't give them the time of day to, try to convince you or whatever the case may be. So, you have to keep in mind, like, for if a person truly is religious, especially in our times today, that, because right now religion in general is being attacked. So a person who is connected to a religion, that is like a strong connection. And so you can't necessarily expect for someone to, just give all that up just in one conversation that you have. Like, I don't care how many proofs you bring out. People, it's not just about the intellectual aspect, it's also the emotional attachment. If you want to put it in another perspective, why do people stay in toxic relationships? Like, the whole world can see, like, this guy is, he's horrible. He's abuser, he's manipulator, and so on and so forth. But, you know, the woman's still staying. Why? Because there's an emotional attachment. And you can flip it. There are toxic women in relationships, and the guy still stays. Why? Because there's an emotional attachment. So, again, I don't know. Even if Dr. Ali didn't use a lot of technical terms, I don't know if I would recommend his video in the senses that I wouldn't want it to be a situation where a person feels attacked, and so now they're just going to put up their defenses, you know, altogether. Where it's like, we can never have a conversation about Islam or anything like that. So um, it's just an aspect of, just keeping that in mind as well. Just curious, have you read Pearls in the Deep by Naz Hassan? I'm thinking of getting copies, not sure I mention it. It seems interesting in terms of the content. You know, it's funny. I actually have not read it. Um, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Dr. Shadi is the one that did the forward to it. If I'm not mistaken. Um, but it seems like it would be a interesting work. Um, but there was actually a podcast that they did. So I had seen like the beginning of it, but I actually have not read the work itself. Um, but yeah, like I said, the Safina Society just recently had a podcast. They actually have two different ones, it seems like. One where Dr. Shadi is the one hosting it, and then the other one where one of some of the other where some of the other Safina Society hosts, basically CD um Munim is doing it. But again, it looks like a decent a decent work in regards to kind of like the question uh uh kind of like the question I was asked earlier about this, this concept of like suffering and evil and how do we deal with this and so on and so forth. And so yeah, and it's actually I'm looking at it. Safina Society is the actual publisher of it, so I'm sure it's probably Dr. Shadi did the forward to it. I just don't remember for certain. But I think, like I said, no, actually, Ashra Rashid did the forward. I'm sorry, Ashra Rashid did the forward. But yeah, Dr. Shadi has a podcast that he did himself, and then, like I said, C. Moeen, he did another one in regards, and so the one that CD Moeen did, I had started watching some of it, but I try not to have especially because like my son, we try to make it that that our son doesn't have much screen time. And so because of that, my son will be the first to kind of G check me in terms of how much screen time I get. So I try not to have too much screen time. So I didn't actually watch the full podcast either. Is it haram to attend a non-Muslim social event regarding subjects on the environment? I mean, if what you're saying is that it's just a social event that's about the environment, I mean, the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned after he had formally received Nubuwwah, after he had formally received revelation, he said that there was a gathering that I intended in the days of Jahiliyyah, that if I were to be called to it during the days of Islam, I would still respond to it. And he was specifically referring to a situation where some of the leaders of Quraysh, they had come together and decided that they were going to form a coalition, basically, where they were going to be the ones to stand up for people who didn't have someone to stand up for them, because this being um, a tribal society, if you didn't have a tribe or a clan to be a support system for you, then basically you are at the whims of the the rest of society. And so when people will come from other places and they didn't have any clan connections, then they would be taken advantage of. And so some of the leaders of Quraysh had decided that they were going to put a stop to this, and they were going to be the ones who would look out for those who did not have anyone to look out for them. And the Prophet Muhammad SAW was of those who attended this particular gathering. And so the Prophet SAW was saying that if that similar type of gathering were to be um, taking place now that he had formally received revelation, he would still respond to that gathering, even though it was being led by non-Muslims. So if non-Muslims are leading a gathering and it's about something that is of good, something of benefit, particularly the environment, because nowadays we have people who, for whatever reason, won't recognize the aspect of global warming or the like. I, I don't recall a time where we be this far into November and it's still 60 degrees out and so on and so forth, or the and some of the other things, but that's a whole nother story. But again, if the aspect of it is to be a means of good for the environment, then that is something that would be deemed to be praiseworthy. Um, Possibly. Now, if it's going to be a situation where they have haram things going on, like it's going to be like a drinking engagement or something like that, then that's another story. We have to look at it from another lens. But again, if it's just the aspect of people getting together to try to share information in order to try to better the situation of the environment, then again, that could be something praiseworthy. And Allah knows best. Allahu A'lam. And just as an addition to that aspect of the pearls in the deep, um, and this is not necessarily a plug per se. I don't necessarily like to try to do that, and it's not even because I have taken or have done the certification for it. But if you are interested in something like that in terms of the pearls in the deep, then I possibly could also recommend for you to look into, if you haven't done already, looking into the Why Islam is True course. because that can be a good supplement to it as well, in terms of how the aspect of suffering and evil actually not only does it not disprove God, but it actually acts as a proof in and of itself that there is a God. So that, the aspect of suffering and evil is actually it in contrary to how people kind of perceive it, as if like, how could there be a God? The aspect of there actually being suffering and evil, that only proves that there is a God. But uh, that concept can be even further uh, expounded if a person were to look into the Why Islam is True course. I'd like to know, what are you to do when you see a brother or sister holding a cup for coins or dollars? I feel bad sometimes when I can't give, or I'm scared to go in my pocketbook because other people are watching you and can rob you next. Uh, this situation is so wicked, you're afraid of everything. Yeah, yeah. The thing about um giving to those who may be panhandling is that there is no requirement for you to give to people who are panhandling. I mean, there is a general recommendation of the Prophet Muhammad SAW to give in sadaqah. And so in general, you're not going to be held responsible. You like, so let me like make some clarifications. So the general recommendation is that a Muslim is recommended to give in sadaqah in whatever possible way. And that can include by giving people money or giving them a smile or helping them in some type of way and so on and so forth. Now, if it's a situation where you can actually help them in the long term, that's considered to be even better. Meaning that instead of just giving a person some sadaqah that's going to help them for the next couple hours or whatever the case may be, but that you can rather help kind of change their life around so they don't have to be panhandling anymore, that's even better. Now, there are some general guidelines to sadaqah in the sense that in general, you can give sadaqah to anyone for whatever reason. However, there is a limit to that in terms of, for example, if you know, and this has to be either with certainty, meaning you 100% know, or overwhelming certainty, meaning like you like 95% sure. Um, if they're going to use it for something haram, then in that case, it would not be permissible. So, like, if you know 100% with certainty that they're going to use it for something haram, then you're not to give them that thing. But sometimes what some ulama have suggested in our times to kind of avoid that is that, for example, if you have an overall suspicion that someone's going to use money for something haram, then instead of giving them money, then you can possibly give them actual goods that they would benefit from. So, for example, if a person is, you know, trying to raise money in order to buy food, and you feel that they might actually just use that to buy drugs or something, then it's possible that instead of you giving them money, that you could just actually give them food itself. So like if you wanted to stop into a store and get them some food and then give it to them. And in this case, you can, somewhat avoid the aspect of having to directly reach into your pocketbook or whatever the case may be in public, but you can go into a store and purchase something and then come back out and give it to that individual. Um, so you can and so you can do that. Um, but in general, you don't necessarily have to investigate either in terms of what a person is going to do with that in terms of sadaqah. So again, sadaqah is very broad. It's not like zakat, where zakat is very specific. Sadaqah is again, it's a general charity that you can give to just about anyone. Now, excuse me. Oh, shit. Now, if there is a fear, like for example, for your own personal safety, then if it's a justified fear, then you can definitely look out for your own well-being, because as the Quran mentions, ku anfusakum wa ahlikum, as that, save yourselves, and then after that, your family, um, from the fire. So meaning that, or like if anyone's ever gone on a plane before, what do they always say in terms of safety instructions? Is that if the air masks come down from the top, then secure your mask first before helping anyone else. And so if you fear for your own personal safety, then you may not risk it to even assist this person at that particular moment. But again, if there's other ways that you could possibly assist, then you can. But the thing is that you don't it's not a requirement that you have to give to every person that you see that's asking. But it should be a situation where at the same time you're not suffering from, stinginess or greed. And so, you want to make sure that you strike a proper balance, because you also don't want to fall victim to the aspect of shaitan, where the shaitan will try to come up with every excuse under the sun for you not to give in charity. And so, and so that's why we say that, for example, even with the aspect of either fear or suspicion or something like that, it's more or less you only want to act upon that if you have overwhelming certainty. Like, I'm like 95% sure about this situation. If it's not, if it's just some type of, doubt and so on and so forth, that can just be the shaitan just trying to keep you from benefiting from giving in charity or sadaqah. So it's going to be a judgment call. But again, it's not a requirement that a person necessarily gives to every panhandler that they see. But again, a way of somewhat trying to get around it is that instead of giving that person money directly, then what you could possibly do is give them uh, whatever it is that they may be in need of directly. So instead of giving them money, then you can just give them the food itself. Wallahu alam. Can you give sadaqah jariyah for a non-Muslim, or is there no such thing? So a sadaqah jariyah, technically speaking, what a sadaqah jariyah is an ongoing charity. So it is possible that you can give a sadaqah jariyah that, goes to a non-Muslim, in the sense that a sadaqah jariyah is meaning that someone is still benefiting from that thing that you did for them, even after you've gone. So even after you've passed away, that they're still benefiting from it. So for example, it could be a sadaqah jariyah that you gave a person knowledge about Islam that eventually causes them to enter into Islam, but it doesn't happen until after you pass away. So that knowledge that you gave them about Islam while they were a non-Muslim ended up being a sadaqah jariyah, or the like. So it is possible. No problem. I'm all over the place with my thoughts. However, I find myself drifting off during my prayers, and I have to keep telling myself to focus. So generally, well, I could say this is in the realm of like if we are going to break down the Deen of Islam into the foundational uh, three foundational categories of Islam, Iman, and Ihsan, is that generally speaking, the aspect of the thoughts that we have in the prayer, they go into the realm of Ihsan. And so ultimately, probably the more difficult slash the more fruitful and more beneficial way of going about it would be to find a sheikh of tazkiyah, to find a sheikh of spiritual growth and development, and to follow him along the path of purification of the heart, which is definitely easier said than done. But uh, on a more like immediate practical aspect, is that our presence of heart within the prayer, generally speaking, is reflective of our dhikr of Allah outside of the prayer. Meaning that the more that we remember Allah outside the prayer, the more we'll be capable of remembering Allah when we're inside the prayer. And just to give as an example, it's not to say that this is your reality, but just the human reality is that if a person is going about their day-to-day lives, so like, they're getting up, they're getting ready to go to work, and then they're on the train or in their car, they're listening to music, and then they get to work, and then they talk to their coworkers about the game last night, or this, that, and the third, and then they're talking about, what they're going to have for lunch, and then they're thinking about um, all the work that they have to get done, and they're focused on, trying to reply to these emails as quickly as possible, and so on and so on and so forth. But throughout the whole example, is there anything that you noticed? So the thing that, or should I say, was there anything that you didn't notice? And hopefully, based upon the question I was asked, what you noticed was not there was that, and nowhere in that example that I was giving did I mention Allah. Everything that I was mentioning was about the dunya, you know. So like, and so basically for many people, our lives is all about the dunya for the most part. It's like everything is dunya, 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 dunya. And then, alhamdulillah, if we're Muslim and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed it into our hearts that we are going to be those who try to establish a prayer and so on and so forth, is that all of a sudden when the prayer time comes, we kind of have this thought that I'm going to completely remove all of that dunya that I was just engrossed in, and now I'm just going to be able to focus on my Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the thing is that that is not really how the human being works. Now, the thing is that, some people can ask the question, well, when I watch television, or if I'm reading a book, or if I'm talking to my friend or something like that, I could be engrossed in that for hours, like, and I won't think about anything except for that thing. And the thing is that what I would say to that person is that it's still that same issue. All of that is dunya. And so your nafs, your ego, your desires, it inclines towards that dunya. So when you sit down and you watch television, or you read a book or something like that, and your nafs is all into it, that's because generally speaking, it's dunya. And so it's feeding right into it. And so the aspect of trying to answer the question is that what you have to do is that you have to try to combat that. So now you want to flip it where all of your ins and outs outside of the prayer, you try to bring Allah into the picture. And so, and this can start off with just as simple as making a correct intention in everything that we do. And so, for example, I'm looking right now, partially, at a copy of the Book of Intentions by Imam Aidarus, one of the Yemeni scholars. So this is the book, if my background won't keep cutting it off. But the Book of Intentions by Habib Muhammad ibn Alawi ibn Amar al-Aidrus. And so even if we, go through even at a cursory level of looking at the different intentions that he mentions that we can make on different things. And so, for example, in I think somewhere here, he has an intention on drinking coffee. He definitely has an intention on drinking, period. Yeah, but then he has the intention of drinking tea and coffee. So for example, if I were to read from a portion of that, he says, and he just gives a list of 4 things to intend when drinking tea and coffee. To follow the example of some of the righteous Salaf in what they drink, to stimulate your body for the sake of worship, to bring joy to the host if visiting someone, and to comply with the appropriate adab and sunnah, meaning the appropriate etiquette and sunnah of drinking, particularly if it's like a hot coffee, a hot drink. So that when I'm drinking the coffee, I'm mindful. I'm not going to blow into the cup because that's not a part of the sunnah. That I'll take 3 small sips. So that, for example, I'll take a sip, say Bismillah first, Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, uh, and so on and so forth. So the thing is that trying to take all the different things that we do on a regular basis where we're usually heedless of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and making it such that we become wakeful with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the more that we're able to be in a state of dhikr outside of the prayer, the more we'll be able to have true dhikr inside the prayer. But as long as we're going off of our day, kind of like business as usual, where we almost go on autopilot and it's just about getting through the hustle and bustle of the dunya, then we will more than likely find that we will not be able to have that true focus in the prayer itself. Wallahu alam. Alhamdulillah. And another thing, I once asked my sheikh about learning how to control one's thoughts. And so if you ever want to attempt this, I'm not saying that you should try this or whatever. I'm just saying that I've asked my sheikh before about controlling my thoughts, and this was one of the pieces of advice that he gave to me. So you can take it as you deem fit. But what he had suggested to me, he said that do this on a day that you have some time. That's how he started it off. So he said, what you can do is take your misbaha of 100. So if you have a subh, you have a misbaha of 100 beads, is that you do the baqiyat salihat on every bead. So what is the baqiyat salihat? So he said that you do the saying of Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar. That's the baqiyat salihat. And so he said, do that. So for every beat, you say Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar. You do that for every beat. Now, here's the kicker, or here's the condition, is that you do it for every bead. However, you're not allowed to allow for one syllable to exit from your tongue, except that you have full presence of heart when you're saying it, meaning that you have to say Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, Wallahu Akbar, fully focusing it in on what it is that you're saying. And that's for every single bead. And anytime that you say it, and any time that at least one syllable you're not fully focused on it, then you have to start all over again from one. And you keep doing that until you're able to go through all 100 beads with full concentration and full presence of heart. And so that was his recommendation for me to, gain control over my thoughts. Needless to say, we won't say what my situation has been with it. But but yeah, that was one of the suggestions that my chef had given to me. And so if you want to attempt to use that as well, uh then I'm sure. So I guess you can imagine what my relationship with it is, but like I said, I'm sure it will work. But again, he said do it on the day that you have time, and in a place that you can be quiet. Yeah. Needless to say, it might take a while. If you receive a message saying if you repeat a particular dua, you will be forgiven whatever it is you're struggling with right away, what is your opinion? Uh, if you receive a message, what do you mean? Like someone sends you a text message or something like that? Or a WhatsApp message saying if you say this dua, then you'll be forgiven, and so on and so forth. I mean, the thing is that unless it is something that is authenticated from the Prophet Muhammad SAW, then we cannot necessarily say what's going to be the situation, particularly with the unseen. However, there is somewhat of an exception to that in the sense that, some of the awliya, some of the righteous, they have formulated du'as, or they have um, done or said certain things, and they found particular benefits from them, and other people have um, said or done those same things, and they found those same results. And so in that type of situation, you could say that from the standpoint of um, multiple people finding the same results by doing certain things, that there can be some reality to it. But the ultimate reality is that if we don't have it directly from the Prophet Muhammad SAW, then it's going to be a situation of Allahu Alam. And so the thing is that unless it's telling you to do something that is like necessarily something blameworthy, then there's very much so a large amount of room in terms of dua and dhikr. However, you want to be mindful and kind of precautious in regards of things that kind of seem out of proportion. Like meaning like, you get a dua or a dhikr that tells you that if you do this one dua or this one dhikr, like you'll get a billion hasanats, and like you'll have a billion um sayyat forgiven, and that you'll enter into paradise without any reckoning. Like if we haven't authenticated something like that from the Prophet Muhammad SAW, then it would be a situation where you might want to be somewhat skeptical of it. However, again, in general, dua and dhikr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's opened up the doorways in terms of dua and dhikr. And so as long as it's not something, as long as it's not something where it will be, necessarily known to be not a part of the religion, or something that is necessarily known to be a forgery, then there's some leeway in there. Like even for example, with hadith that are da'if, is that if it involve like general good, like if it involves just, encouraging people to do good works and things like that, many of the ulama, overlooked the weakness of the chain and the like, just because there's really no harm in it per se. But Allah knows best. What dua softens the qalb? I feel like I have seen so many hardships in myself and others that I feel desensitized and feel my heart has hardened. Um, I would probably say, particularly in our time, even before you get to the aspect of dua, I would say unplug. So what I mean by unplug, I mean like, depending on how bad the situation is, you may want to completely unplug. So meaning that, drastically reduce the television, the internet, social media and the like. Particularly looking at images and things like that nature, because they do have an effect upon the heart. Um, and so um, trying to reduce and then sometimes greatly reduce the stimuli that you're getting on a constant, regular basis. And then any of the prophetic du'as are du'as that will soften the heart. So sending salawats upon the Prophet Muhammad SAW is something general that the ulama, always kind of recommend. Uh, so, even working, so like when you work in stressful environments, like, so for example, I used to work in a prison, and my brother will try to arguably say that it's not as stressful as some of the things he goes through, but in any case, and so in those type of situations, you definitely need to have a means of unwinding. So the thing is that the more that you're exposed to shar, the more that you're exposed to evil, or the more that you're exposed to difficulties and hardships, the more that you have to be engaged in the dhikr. And so again, it's going to be in those situations where you're not at work and so on and so forth, is that you must be engaged in dhikr. And even when you are at work, trying to keep the dhikr as much as possible. So, if you can just, uh, as you're going about your day, just having at least at the beginning, at least just having it on your tongue, it could be as simple as the kalima, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, or sending salawats upon the Prophet ﷺ, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, and just really just trying to be in a state of dhikr and dua, in order to combat what it is that you're going to be taking in. And then when you're not there, trying to be around good company and going to places that are going to increase you in khair and so on and so forth. Um, and so, uh, and so, you know, all of this is just to combat the aspects. But again, I still would suggest is that outside of work, is that you try, to also not be engaged in the screen and stuff like that. Because again, if you're already in an environment where you have to be, because that's your job and it's already causing um difficulties and hardships, then you don't want that same situation to be uh kind of assisted by the things that a person might see on the screen and so on and so forth. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy, inshallah. Right. And so, Jazakallah khair for everyone who participated and came out today. And inshallah, we will leave you in Allah's care. And inshallah, we will possibly see you in our next session. Bismillah. Please keep us and our families in your dua, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alam wa asbana wa ni'mal wakil. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.